This is a special report from Fox 35 News, tracking the tropics.
Hey there everyone, Fox 35 Storm Team Meteorologist Noah Bergen here. Thanks for clicking on our tropical update video online, our website, our apps, and on our YouTube channel. Remember, make sure you subscribe to us here if you're watching on YouTube at Fox 35 Orlando. All right, let's get right to the maps on this 30th of July 2024. Again, I'm meteorologist Noah Bergen. You could also follow me over on social media. I'm on Facebook and Twitter, especially provide a lot of updates in terms of the nitty-gritty stuff on Twitter and also to a lesser extent, but also on Facebook as well. And you could follow us on those platforms as well. All right, so here's the latest outlook as of Tuesday evening from the Hurricane Center. Medium chances for development in the orange. Now, a couple of things I want you to take away from this. It's not going to be a hurricane, at least when it's near Florida, I don't think. But development is probable over the weekend. I can say that confidently. The east coast of Florida especially should watch this. If you're in the state of Florida, it's really the east coast, I think, that should watch. Now, the track and strength of this eventual system is still rather tricky. Whether this system goes right close to the Space Coast and then up to the Carolinas or more out in the eastern envelope of this orange area remains to be seen. You see the Hurricane Center, in case you're wondering, includes this orange off the west coast of Florida. That's because there is a handful of really outlier models that try to fire this up in the Gulf and then hook it back across the state. Could that happen? I guess. But to be honest, I highly doubt that would happen and would be flabbergasted if that happened at this point. So here's what you need to know as of tonight. The European model today shifted a little bit closer to Florida. Now, we're not talking a major system. Let me get that out of the way. This is not doom and gloom. This is not the sky falling. This is not Category 3 hurricane. But it'll be a late developing storm over very hot water with light wind shear Saturday night into Sunday. So wherever it is, there could be coastal impacts this weekend. How close to Florida still remains uncertain. Within the European model, there's some ensembles that are right on the Space Coast, some 50 miles offshore, some 300 miles offshore. Obviously, further away it is, the less impact we have. Now, something else to make attention to here, Sunday is a new moon. We've got astronomical high tides. So if there's something spinning offshore, times of high tide on Sunday, could be some coastal flooding. You get where I'm going. So that's why, especially if you're on the beaches of the East Coast, we'll keep an eye out. If you're inland in Florida, I really don't think you have much to be concerned about. You don't need to go stock up on things. This is not that type of system. But the chances of impacts are highest at the coast, should this even sneakily get a little stronger than we think right now. So a reminder, we've had Alberto, Beryl, Chris. Beryl was the historic long tracker. Alberto and Chris went into Mexico, and that leaves Debbie. So when and if, I think when, this becomes a tropical storm at some point in its life, it will get the name Debbie. Why is this an interesting forecast? Well, the center of this eventual system will probably generate somewhere over the Bahamas, and then in all likelihood kind of parallel the Gulf Stream and then hook around the Carolinas. That's the hottest part of the water off of Florida's east coast. Remember, because in the Caribbean there's something called the loop current. You can look it up on Google. It's quite interesting. Coming out of the Caribbean, the water goes up like this, does a little loop, and then comes around the Keys, the Straits, and then off the east coast, then up to New England. This is the Gulf Stream, and the amount of ocean heat content in there right now is very high. In fact, it's broadly in most of the Gulf, the Caribbean, the Atlantic at record highs still, as it's been for the last few months. But where this will be over, very hot water. And when it's over it, the wind shear will lighten. In fact, there'll be a lot of outflow to support something that strengthens. So even though tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, this may look like nothing, once we get to Saturday and Sunday, wouldn't shock me if right off the coast, somewhere in here, boom, we get something that takes off. From nothing to a tropical storm pretty quick. Now, water vapor loop, if you looked at this quickly, you probably would say, where in tarnation is this? Well, a couple of things for me to highlight to you. We call this a wave-breaking high over the south central United States, and there's this northwestern flow across the Midwest. There were tornadoes tonight in Indiana, in Kentucky, in Tennessee, and in Nashville. Down to Atlanta, and even in our area in central Florida, northwest to southeast moving storms, and then today in Florida they moved north to south. So that's what's way ahead of this system. But in the Atlantic, there's high pressure right here, little speed max here of wind blowing faster beneath the high. But if you look at these arrows and the water vapor, notice there's a little hump right here, a little droop, and then down. This squiggle line right here, that's the tropical wave. You see there is some thunderstorms. There's not a lot, but there's an upper level low and there's a surface feature. The surface feature that's down over here, this is going to get buried in the southern Caribbean this weekend. And by buried, I mean this energy right here is going to go into the Caribbean and then just be nothing. So the models the last few days were trying to merge that northward with this upper level low and then bring something towards Florida. I don't think that's how this is going to happen. This is a low pressure area or a tropical wave up at about 20,000 feet. And this little hump you see here, how the winds go like this and then like that, it's not closed off yet, even that high up. This will drift towards Hispaniola over the next few days. Then should it stay north of the islands and help generate some surface action and surface low, we'll see what happens once it gets to the Bahamas as we go into Saturday. So here it is in a little cleaner version. So this is the 500 millibar height in winds. So in English, 20,000 feet we're looking at here. And also I've plotted the vorticity on here. Vorticity is just the meteorological term for spin in the atmosphere. Now notice, it might be faint for you to see, but this right here, that's high pressure. There's your high in the Atlantic. And notice this little hump right here in the isobars you see right there. Yoink, yoink. That's the tropical wave right here. There's not really any real vorticity with it yet, but the energy aloft at 500 millibars is going to progress west. And should it continue to stay north of the islands, and then once it gets to about here, it'll feel much more favorable dynamics for development. And I do think we'll see something form as we go into the weekend. So in terms of the steering flow, there's a huge area of high pressure over the Rocky Mountains. There's a huge area of high pressure over the Atlantic. And the key is, where does this hypothetical system in between track? Because the magnitude and the position of both of these has kind of waffled back and forth over the last few days. So where in the gap does this potential tropical system go? But you can kind of see that's why the outlook is the way it is, because it's probably going to follow this bigger high over the Atlantic and hook around something like that as we go later into the weekend into next week. So in terms of where this is going to track in the likelihood, in times of meteorological uncertainty, we use ensembles. In this case, the European ensemble has been remarkably accurate, I think, so far, and consistent, really, is what I meant to say. Really consistent in showing this. So this is the probability of a tropical storm. And notice about 70% here off Florida's east coast, but this is a good way offshore. Now, yesterday, this was about over here. So it did shift a little bit closer to Florida. A lot of the times in meteorology, you get what we call the windshield wiper effect, where the data goes one way, then the other way, then one way, then the other way over the span of a few days. And it ends up being back basically where it started. So that's possibly what we could be seeing here. But I think it's most likely that by time this low, that tropical wave gets to about Nassau Saturday afternoon, we'll start to see a lot of thunderstorms fire, then maybe a tropical depression or a storm that fires up in this orange and then starts to move northeast up towards the Carolinas Sunday into Monday, then Tuesday of next week. Now, with something offshore like this, are we going to get big weather in Orlando, Gainesville, Tallahassee, Miami, Tampa? No. But the East Coast, will have that. Remember, the low pressure and the tropical storm or depression rotates counterclockwise. So we'll have a lot of northeast to southwest flow at times of high tide. Could there be some minor coastal flooding at a minimum? I think that's fair. Could the outer rain bands make it onto the Space Coast and the East Coast? Possibly, but again, it depends on the track, right? If it tracks a lot closer like this, then yeah, there might be, in the more extreme case, if the storm develops over Nassau, then tracks right for about Cape Canaveral, the center where my finger is, and then hooks out, we could even end up with tropical storm warnings or conditions on Florida's east coast, at least the central east coast. That's possible. Do I think that's likely? Maybe not likely, but certainly possible. I wouldn't say unlikely, but possible at this point. So the most likely scenario, the bottom line, to put a bow tie on this for you, is that it generates sometime Saturday, tropical depression, and maybe probably a storm, gets the name Debbie, hooks safely south or east and then northeast of Florida and the Carolinas. But as you can see, there still is a disparity in even the European ensembles, which there's 50 of them, where specifically it will track. So that's the latest with this system. Consider it maybe a little appetizer, if you will, for the upcoming hurricane season. So it's not a major impact to Florida, even in the worst case scenario, but the impacts that may be felt would be along the East Coast, Volusia County, New Smyrna Beach, Daytona, Palm Coast, Ormond Beach, St. Augustine, Cape Canaveral, Melbourne, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night through the day on Sunday. Stay with us here at the Fox 35 Storm Team. We'll have updates for you over the next few days, and I'll see you back here tomorrow on our YouTube channel with another video update. Thanks for watching.